close your eyes. Let the noise of the day drift behind you. Let the light come down soft. Let your breath slow. There's a story I'd like to tell you, if you're ready. This is not a story of riches, nor even of glory. It's a quiet tale with thudding basketballs for lullabies, and gymnasium rafters for starlit ceilings. It begins in a town you may have never wandered to, but whose name lingers in the echoes of hardwood floors. Akron, Ohio, a city of industry, of rubber tires and cold winters, a place that hums not with spotlights but with silence, and in that silence, a child was born. On December 30th, 1984, he arrived in the waning days of a year too tired to celebrate. His mother, Gloria, was still only 16, just a girl herself, cradling a boy with brown eyes and wide lungs, a single heartbeat, surrounded by uncertainty. They had no fathers, footsteps to follow, no house to call their own, only plastic bags stuffed with what little they owned, making their way from one borrowed room to the next dot, sometimes for a few days, sometimes, if they were lucky, for more. And as he grew, the boy became familiar with time spent watching others from a distance. Other children, other rooms, other faces, but often, always, he held a ball, clutched to his chest, or bouncing in rhythm with his thoughts as he walked alone. Sometimes that ball was worn flat, too old to truly bounce, but to him it was enough to imagine, enough to dream. They moved so often he forgot the names of most of the streets, but he never forgot the cracked sidewalk near a housing unit where he first tried to dribble with both hands. Never forgot the rickety crate hoop nailed to a pole, or how the cold bit at his fingertips when he played outside as dusk fell into darkness. In classrooms, he rarely spoke. Teachers remembered the quiet boy, tall already, but quiet. He didn't need to talk, because he had a ball, and a vision wider than the walls that held him. What he wanted couldn't be named, only felt in the arc of a shot that found its way in the flick of the wrist, the rhythm of breath, before a free throw. But still, he was just a boy, with hunger in his belly, and songs of movement in his bones. His muscles learned to remember how to leap, how to block, how to course down a narrow court with perfect balance, before his mind even understood what greatness could be. It wasn't glory he craved, it was steadiness, a bed that didn't change, a door that only opened in welcome, never eviction, a place his mother could rest. LeBron, that was his name, a gentle name, spoken in rooms full of worry. Then soon, in gyms, stunned by the sight of a boy who made spectators fall quiet. But even before that, before headlines and cameras, there was just Akron. Weathered, grey Akron, and a child who loved the sound of the ball more than the sound of applause. One day, when he was very young, maybe 7, maybe 8, he asked Gloria if she'd ever think about leaving Akron. She smiled but shook her head. "This is where we are," she said. "And where we're from," she whispered. So he never dreamed of leaving. Instead, he began to think of lifting, of rising and reaching. What if he thought just one boy could carry so many hearts with him, could climb so high that no one would ever fall again? So as the world turned, slowly, and life in Akron rolled on with cracked windows and low ceilings, something else stirred. A heat formed inside him. Not anger, not fire, but light, wrapped in muscle and movement. He didn't yet know the names of the men he'd be compared to, didn't know Magic or Jordan, didn't know what the league was or why people spoke of it with reverence. But he knew the feel of the ball against his palm. He knew the weight of his mother's gaze in the bleachers. He knew how every jump could defy gravity, if only for a second. And one day, that boy's name would echo in arenas, would be chanted by strangers on distant shores, would be stitched on jerseys, etched in banners, said beside legends. But not yet, not now. Now, it was still just a whisper beneath dim streetlights, a whisper of leather against cement, a whisper of Dreamson, the night air above Akron. And so, let yourself drift there, to a time before the cheers, before the rings, to a child in a worn pair of shoes, walking home from an empty court with stars above him and stars within him. He was still just a child, but already he moved like a breeze through tall grass, light on his feet, pulled forward by something unseen. By the age of 9, he had already passed through more addresses than birthdays, more corners of Akron than most grown men. But in the blur of instability, one door opened and didn't close. The door of Frankie Walker. Frankie was more than a coach. He was a man of steadiness, something rare in LeBron's young life. A disciplinarian, yes, but also an anchor. When he saw LeBron missing school days, falling behind, overwhelmed by the churn of hardship, he did something others hadn't. He invited the boy into his home, into routine, into warmth. And under that roof, for perhaps the first time, LeBron learned what calm felt like. He began waking to the same ceiling each morning, riding the same route to school, sleeping in a quiet that wasn't weighted with uncertainty. Frankie gave him more than a place to stay. He gave him consistency. And with that, the boy who had always known movement began to grow roots. By 4th grade, it was clear. There was something sacred in the way he moved with the game. Faster than the others, more aware, as if the court itself whispered its secrets. To him, spaces, angles, possibilities revealed in real time. He would pass not just to assist, but to uplift. He played not to dominate, but to include. The dream began to take shape on the dusty courts and echoing gyms of Akron school leagues. At James A. Garfield Elementary, the legend was still a quiet one talked about in hallway whispers, growing louder each season. By middle school, LeBron was already drawing a crowd, students lingering after hours just to watch him shoot corner threes, sink layups blindfolded with muscle memory alone. But it wasn't only basketball. For a while, football called to him too. He played wide receiver with the body of a linebacker and the grace of a sprinter. Coaches said if he focused on the gridiron, he'd have a future there too. He caught passes like they belonged in his hands, even in cold, thick Akron snow. But winter always gives way to spring, and basketball always pulled him back. Then came high school, St. Vincent St. Mary, where the boy became a force. He joined hands with childhood friends, Drew Joyce III, Sheehan Cotton, and Willie McGand, formed what would be known as the Fab Four. Together, they weren't just good, they were transcendent. Freshmen playing like seniors. They drew crowds that forced the school to move games to the University of Akron's larger arena. Standing ovations, state titles, each victory like a verse in a larger song being written. And LeBron, his game bloomed. Long-range shots, no-look passes, fast breaks that blurred into streaks of green and gold. He became a symphony in motion. But even as the noise around him grew, cameras, journalists, scouts, late-night phone calls, he remained ... centered. Walk in the school hallways with headphones on, hoodie up, nodding shyly at classmates. The boy who once had no steady place to sleep now had his name painted on sneakers. His face adorned billboards. Though barely 17, he had become a beacon. National magazines came calling. First Slam magazine. Then, in a moment that startled the basketball world, Sports Illustrated put him on their cover. The chosen one, they called him. A high school junior, face calm, gaze distant, wearing confidence like a second jersey. And yet, the lights never changed his rhythm. If anything, they made him focus more deeply on the quiet. He kept practicing long after teammates left. The squeak of his sneakers echoed alone in the gymnasium's hush. There was no crowd there, no coaches, just the sound of breath and bounce, of work, of memory. He'd sit on the bleachers when he finished, silent, stretching legs that would one day leap into history. His thoughts would drift not to NBA dreams or endorsement deals, but to his mother, Gloria. How she now cheered louder than anyone, how she never missed a game, how he could spot her in the crowd quicker than any defender. LeBron carried her, dreams inside his own. Every layup, every fast break, every pass laced with gratitude. Because behind the crown they were already placing on his head, there was still just that boy from Akron, who once held a busted ball in the cold, and dreamed of making his mother proud. Then came the whispers of more. NBA scouts in the rafters, gyms in sunglasses, the Nike and Adidas reps trailing the halls, trying to glimpse the future. Every game stacked with expectation. But LeBron stayed light. He didn't press, he danced. On fast breaks, he seemed to float. On deep threes, he barely blinked. It wasn't dominance, it was ease refined by relentless attention. His teammates fed off it. They weren't just supporting cast, they were a family, a unit, bound tight by childhood summers, deep laughs, and hours spent chasing each other around neighborhood courts. And that's how LeBron wanted it. Not to rise alone, but to rise together. In his junior and senior years, more accolades arrived than he could have imagined. National Player of the Year, Gatorade Awards, an invitation, even, to join the NBA without college in between. Yet still, he returned home after games, pulled his hoodie tighter, scrolled through late-night TV and tugged at that same dream that began on a cracked sidewalk. He was the chosen one now. The king, some whispered, but still, also the boy who once asked his mother if they would ever leave Akron. Now the world was asking when he would, but he wasn't in a rush. Not yet, not when the gym was still waiting each night, lights half dimmed, silence thick. Not when his friends were still by his side, laughing over fast food, arguing over music, because it was all happening too soon. Too bright, too loud. But he had found his silence, and he wasn't ready to leave it behind, not yet. They called him ready long before he knew what that meant. The whispers that once fluttered through Akron gymnasiums had grown into full-throated predictions, and on a warm June night in 2003, they became prophecy. Draft night, Madison Square Garden, the Cleveland Cavaliers hold the first pick. There's a hush, then a pulse. And then, with the first pick in the 2003 NBA draft, the Cleveland Cavaliers select LeBron James from St. Vincent St. Mary High School, Akron, Ohio. There he stood, 17 no more, draped in white, tall-backed and solemn, his name now part of league history. A boy now handed a franchise, given not just a jersey, but a purpose. And suddenly, the ride was real. Back in Cleveland, hope lifted rooftops. This wasn't just a star. This was homegrown salvation. And yet, for all the ceremony, nothing could prepare anyone, not even LeBron, for how easily his game would translate, how fluidly his myth would become real. Opening night of his rookie year, Sacramento, against seasoned pros, hardened defenders. LeBron stepped on that hardwood like it belonged to him. 0.25 points, 9 assists, 6 rebounds. He didn't announce his arrival with thunder. He glided in on air, each pass precise, each shot confident, as though he were only picking up where a dream had left off. By season's end, he would be Rookie of the Year. Commercials already showed him as a king, a child crowned in gold. But behind the sculpted highlights and magazine spreads, his calling card was always the same: unselfishness. Because even now, as greatness cracked through the surface, LeBron's eyes stayed wide, looking not just at the rim but around him, always searching, sensing, sharing. To pass was to believe you weren't alone. And in his game, his way of playing, the city saw itself. Willing, enduring, generous. A place that had waited for something to believe in again. Cleveland had carried heartbreak for generations, battle-scarred stadiums, lost chances, icons who departed, and then came this teenager with the shoulders of giants and the heart of a child. He played every night with that dual weight, the dreams of a franchise, and the dreams of his mother, still seated courtside. They lost more than they won those early years. The roster was uneven, the competition steep, but LeBron still rose, averaging near triple-doubles, creating moments that seemed stitched from fables. Game winners from impossible angles, dunks that bent physics, no-look passes through thickets of hands. Every night he added another thread to the tapestry, and yet, always, humility. In press conferences, he deflected praise. In huddles, he lifted teammates. He would score when needed, but lived for the assist. Not because the camera found him there, but because that's where belief lived. And Cleveland believed. For the first time in a long time, in 2006, he made his first playoffs, spiraling through the Washington Wizards with poise beyond his years. A glimpse of what was to come, the way he could bend time when it mattered most, slow the chaos into calm. And in 2007 came the summit. Conference finals versus the Pistons, a veteran, bruising squad built to deny futures. Game 5, Detroit, overtime. LeBron scored 29 of the Cavaliers' last 30 points, including the game winner, drives through triple teams, mid-air switches with defenders draped around him like cloaks, a kind of controlled madness. Poise turned to power, turned to poetry. Cleveland won the series, reached the finals for the first time, and in those early hours, banners began to flutter inside people's minds. Kingdoms of hardwood, thrones beneath backboards. The finals, though, dealt a different lesson. San Antonio, a dynasty in full bloom. Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, the Cavs, were swept. And afterward, Duncan approached LeBron, wrapped an arm round him, and whispered, "This league is yours, young fella." Even in loss, he had transformed something. The boy from Akron was now part of a new lineage. The league didn't just respect him, it braced for what would follow. And what followed was more weight. Season after season, LeBron elevated scoring titles, All-Star MVPs, All-NBA honors. But championships, still out of reach. The pressure, unrelenting. The media called for him to take over, to shoot more, to be selfish. But that wasn't the kid who learned the game on cracked asphalt. That wasn't the boy raised in borrowed rooms, taught by Frankie Walker. That team came first. He didn't want to be a one-man empire. He wanted to build, yet even builders tire. By 2010, 7 years in, he had become the most transcendent player without a championship, and the league began to whisper again. Could he finish the story? Because greatness, in their eyes, needed gold. The courtside smiles were no longer enough. A decision loomed, and for the first time, LeBron James faced the question not of how high he could rise, but where and with whom. And so, just as he had done so many times before, in silence, alone, in the space between childhood and battle, LeBron thought of legacy, of his city, of his friends, of his future. A choice had to be made, and soon the world would watch. They gathered around televisions that July, not for a game, not for a championship, but for a decision. The moment had been teased, promoted, televised in prime time. And there he sat composed, wearing a checkered shirt in a Connecticut studio when he spoke the words that would echo in alleys and arenas alike. I'm going to take my talents to South Beach. 7 words, a choice, and a fracture. In Cleveland, heartache fell like sudden snow. Jerseys burned on sidewalks. Murals were peeled apart. The boy they raised, the beacon they believed in, was gone. But he hadn't left in anger. He'd left in search of something. Purpose, partnership, victory. He had tried to do it himself for 7 seasons. Still, the trophy eluded him. So he joined Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh in Miami. 3 stars now aligned, not to escape pressure, but to shoulder it together. The outrage roared louder than applause. Headlines dubbed him coward. Former fans called him traitor. And for the first time, LeBron wasn't the prodigy or the promise. He was the villain. But villains don't train harder because they're hated. And LeBron didn't stop working. In fact, he grew sharper, focused, hollowed by the sting of disappointment, and hardened by flame. In their first season, the Heat stormed to the NBA Finals. Flash and force, choreographed brilliance. It seemed the coronation had merely been delayed, but Dallas had other plans. Led by Dirk Nowitzki, Silent Shaw, and Surgical, the Mavericks dismantled the illusion. They found the holes, exploited the nerves, stunned the stars. LeBron was subdued, timid even. When the lights were brightest, he passed too often, moved too little. The weight of expectation silenced his fire. And in the locker room after game 6, he sat alone, facing the mirror. 7 years of effort, and now betrayal. It would have been easy to vanish, to deflect or defend. But LeBron chose a different path. He rebuilt in the off-season. He went to work. No cameras, no press, just hours of post moves, studying footage, relearning the game he had once played on instinct alone. He reached into history, called on Hakeem Olajuwon, learned footwork, patience, how to play not just above the rim, but with grace below it. And when the season returned, so did he. Sculpted, not louder, but wiser. Now he stalked the court with supreme calm, vision like wind, precision like rain. He no longer needed approval. He needed only the basket and the moment. In 2012, the Heat returned to the finals, this time against the Thunder, a team of youth and fire. LeBron didn't blink. Game after game, he orchestrated everything, commanded the pace, delivered daggers, kept his composure through pain and pressure. In Game 5, they sealed it. not with a buzzer beater, but with dominance. And when the final horn sounded, he didn't leap in joy. He bowed his head, he breathed, and held the trophy not like a prize, but like a promise finally fulfilled. 1 year later, it happened again. The 2013 finals. The Spurs, revenge and greatness, all braided into 7 exhausting games. Game 6, Miami trailed. Fans exited the arena early, thinking it over. But inside, with seconds to spare, a missed 3, an offensive board. And Elena Whisper, away from the sideline, released a shot that traveled straight into legend. Tie game. Overtime, in Game 7, LeBron closed the door himself. Jumpers, steals. A final mid-range dagger, released with textbook form and ancient calm. He raised the trophy again, this time with his legacy intact. The MVP, the conqueror, the once scorched name now etched in reverence. But even in radiance, the noise never stopped. Critics said he took an easy road, said his path wasn't pure. But purity isn't found in fandom. It's found in fire, in pain, in rebuilding upwards. After the fall, through it all, LeBron held no bitterness, only gratitude. For the work, for the wait, for the chance to change and return. Because South Beach didn't crown him, it carved him every outside insult, every mocking chant, every banner hoisted in enemy cities. He took it in and gave back wins, numbers, stories that could not be denied. And quietly, underneath the titles and the parades, one thought remained. It still wasn't home, not truly, because, as golden as the Miami sun had been, his dreams still pulsed in Cleveland hues. He missed the rust of the rafters, the hunger of the forgotten city that once dared to dream with him, and slowly, behind the scenes, a return became possible, because even kings long for where they were first given love, and soon the road would curl back to where the whispers first began, back to the city still waiting, still hoping, still watching the horizon, and wondering was the boy from Akron still theirs, and would he ever come home? He returned not with banners or parades, but with a letter, published in silence, without images or spectacle. It was words, sincere, weathered, weighty. "I'm coming home," he wrote, and just like that, what was broken began its slow work of healing. The people of Cleveland, those who had once burned jerseys in heartbreak, read the letter with trembling eyes. Not everyone forgave at first. Some never did, but many saw the deeper truth. He had left to grow, and now he was returning not as a boy, but a man. He didn't promise ease. He didn't talk of rings or dominance. He spoke only about responsibility, about the kids in Akron, about making his city proud, not with championships, but with effort, with presence. When the Cavaliers announced his return, the streets hummed again. Murals were repainted, billboards were reborn, and beneath it all, a people dared to hope again. But the road home was layered, not smooth. Instant success was never guaranteed. There were new faces around him. Young Kyrie Irving with a handle like a whisper. Kevin Love bringing heart and sacrifice. Talent was abundant, but trust that would come slowly. The first season, back 2014, it felt electric and unfinished. Flashes of greatness, moments of dissonance, but through the trials, they marched to the playoffs, to the finals, and just as the victory dream sharpened, lost, darkened its edges. Kevin Love, shoulder torn, Kyrie Irving, injured in Game 1, and LeBron, alone again. facing a surging Golden State team with brilliance in every corner. He fought, anyway, averages unseen. Triple doubles like clockwork, dragging a broken roster through the fire. 2 wins. Almost 3, but in the end, too many pieces were missing. The Warriors claimed their crown. When the series ended, LeBron didn't lower his head. He had given everything, and the city knew it. He stared forward, toward seasons still unwritten, because what he had begun was finished. Not yet. The 2015 off-season brought change, and with it, belief got. Cleveland reloaded, more experience, better chemistry, arrested Kyrie, a ready love, that years run smoother, stronger, and as spring gave way to summer, there they stood again. NBA Finals, Cleveland versus Golden State. Part 2, Game 1, lost. Game 2, lost. Down. 3-2-1. The finals already being written off by history. But the Cavaliers didn't fold. LeBron didn't fade. Instead, he gathered and burned. Game 5 in Oakland. LeBron and Kyrie both scoring for 1. A storm of grace and rage. The first team ever with 2 40-point scorers in a finals game. Game 6, back in Cleveland. LeBron repeats, another 41, chase down blocks like thunderclaps, crossovers, splitting gravity, series tied. Game 7, a game without air. The court carried weight with every step, and in those final minutes, the moments carved themselves into eternity. LeBron's block, impossibly, timed a sprint across the court. And then Iguodala's layup swatted from glass by a hand that refused to let history slip. Then Kyrie's shot, a step-back 3. Silence, then explosion. And finally, with seconds left, LeBron again fouled. Hard, falls to the ground. Clutching his wrist, but he stands. Hits the final free throw. Cleveland 93. Golden State 89. And then the horn. Time freezes and erupts. LeBron falls to the floor. Tears spilled not from pride, but from release. The boy woe had carried a city, had come home and fulfilled a promise whispered in childhood. Cleveland. This is for you, he said. And the city shouted in return. 52 years, 52 winters of waiting, and now warmth. Parades overtook downtown, infants named LeBron. Old men wept openly. It wasn't just a title, it was a return home. At last, but quieter than the crowds. Deeper than the cheers was, a stillness inside James. A breath finally exhaled. Because, through injury, loss, shame, fury, he had come full circle. Not to be celebrated, but to share something, lasting, hope, and when the spotlight dimmed, and the court cleared, he looked once more at the rafters, at the air where banners now danced. The dream was no longer silent. It had a name, and it had been earned. Not all kings seek thrones. Some build homes. When the parades quieted, and the echoes of Cleveland's triumph faded into the hum of everyday life, LeBron stood at a crossroads. He had kept his promise, brought a title home. But he knew that greatness isn't a destination. It is a rhythm, a heartbeat that calls for more. In the stillness that followed the 2016 finals, LeBron began to look beyond rings. He thought about impact, about memory. Not the highlight kind, but the kind that takes root in soil and soul. He thought of Akron, of kids who, like him once, stared out apartment windows and didn't know how to dream beyond survival. They needed more than courts. They needed hope. That didn't disappear when the streetlights flickered. They needed a school, so he built one, the I Promise. School opened its doors in 2018, and these weren't just classrooms. They were sanctuaries, places where pencils felt like weapons against doubt, and every binder carried belief. It was built not for headlines, but for hugs, for meals at no cost, for after-school support, for parents trying to create futures on minimum wage. It was LeBron's most radical act of all, choosing to nurture, not just inspire. And when asked why, he only said, "We're family." And this is what family does. But family also means speaking out. And LeBron, once cautious with his voice, now let it rise. He didn't flinch when justice called his name. When Trayvon Martin died in 2012, LeBron wore a hoodie in silence, alongside his team. In 2014, he wore "I Can't Breathe." In press rooms and on social media, he talked not as a star, but as a father, a black man, an American unafraid to ask hard questions. They told him to shut up and dribble, but instead, he opened doors, released documentaries, hosted forums, built platforms. He became as visible off the court as he was on it, but not louder, just clearer, like a message written in skywriting, temporary, but impossible to ignore. And all the while, he kept playing, still climbing, still contorting his body to turn seconds into stories. Then came L.A. in 2018. LeBron signed with the Lakers, a move of many meanings. There were skeptics. Some said it was Hollywood calling. Others whispered he was chasing shadows, the legends, robed in purple and gold. But for LeBron, it wasn't about legacy. It was about positioning pieces. On the court, a roster still in repair. Off the court, endless possibility. Media ventures, uninterrupted. Spring Hill, producing stories he believed the world needed to hear. Stories like his own. But basketball still called him forward. In 2020, the season broke. A virus turned arenas into mausoleums. Courts were silenced. March vanished beneath masks and fear. And when the game returned, it came back to a bubble. A new world built on Disney campus, courts. Players confined, tested, away from home, isolated in surreal quiet. But in that quiet, LeBron thrived. He led like the future depended on it. And maybe it did. The Lakers, now reinforced with Anthony Davis's unicorn in stature, and soul danced through the playoffs with poise and purpose. They wore Black Lives Matter across their backs, knelt during anthems, cried at memorials, honored Kobe, gone just months before, whose absence still clung to the rafters like fog. The finals were strange. No fans, no fireworks. Just pressure in its purest form, against the heat, young and refusing. To break, LeBron commanded the floor. Pick and rolls like clockwork. Defensive rotations like breath. Every possession, a message. We are not done. And when it ended, when his fourth title shimmered beneath disinfected lights, he didn't shout. He only said, "I want my damn respect." Not out of ego, but out of truth. Because even with 4 rings, even with finals MVPs on both coasts, even with decades of dominance, he had never been the chosen narrative. Too unselfish, too measured, too unwilling to play the villain for good. But LeBron never needed the story to favor him. He only needed time, and time, it turns out, bowed to him after the title. He returned again to Akron, walked the halls of his school, listened to young voices say his name, not with awe, but with trust. There, he wasn't the king. He was Mr. James, a man who kept showing up. And even as new stars, rose young legs, fresh names, he showed no sign of closure. He played not just to win, but to show them how to pass, how to invest, how to endure, because greatness that hoards is temporary, but greatness that teaches, that's forever. And through every chapter, one thing remained: a sense of stillness inside him, a clarity that legacy isn't a statue or stat line, it's what echoes when the court is empty, when the cheers are gone, and his echo now, it isn't a roar, it's a whisper of change, of children learning, of justice unfolding, of dreams coming home. He had been in the league for nearly 2 decades, and still the game bent itself toward him. It wasn't force anymore, not the ferocity of thunderous dunks or the blur of full-court sprints. Now it was grace, memory, an ability to read a moment before it arrived, to adjust without panic, to influence without strain. And so, year after year, he stayed. Not faded stayed. He shifted positions, became a point guard in his mid-30s, led the league in assists, quietly passed legends on all-time lists: Jordan, Bryant, Malone. Every milestone added with reverence, not celebration. No parades, just motion. Then came one night in early 2023, the Lakers at home, a packed arena buzzing with tension and anticipation. In the third quarter, step-back jumper from just inside the free throw line. The net rippled, and just like that, Kareem's record fell, 38,387 points. Now, history written under a different name, LeBron James. He didn't collapse in glory. He didn't scream. He exhaled, his family near, tears waiting but delayed. He had scored more points than any player to ever live, but it was never just the points. It was the time that earned them. The seasons he played through injury, through criticism, through expectation that never dulled, only sharpened. It was a man who'd carried the spark of a child well into his 30s, and now, into his late 30s, into 40, he kept going, not out of pride, but because he wasn't done building. The NBA had changed dramatically around him. 3-point barrages, faster possessions, younger bodies, rest days, load management, social media storms. But LeBron adapted. He extended his range, changed his nutrition, hired biomechanics experts, reworked his off days into hours in hyperbaric chambers. He didn't avoid aging. He negotiated with it. And all the while, another story was forming beside his own, Bronny, his eldest son, rising in the ranks. A natural athlete, yes, but also a student, a thinker. And LeBron watched with quiet wonder, not pushing, only guiding, always present, always proud. The world whispered of the possibility, father and son on the same court, not in backyard pickup, not in fantasy, but in NBA arenas, a pairing never seen. He spoke of it not as a marketing dream, but as a father's wish, to pass the ball down the floor and see his own blood catch it, to make history not for glory, but for love. And still, he kept adding seasons. In one stretch, he scored 56 points against the Warriors. In another, 47 points the day before his 38th birthday. Nights that should have belonged to players a decade younger. Nights that whispered, he's still here, but not here to chase ghosts. He never tried to be Jordan, never tried to outshine the stories that built the court beneath him. He only sought to be whole, to arrive every season still mastering the balance between legacy and presence. And through it all, his relationship with the game deepened. He spoke of it like a friend, a sacred one. Time had taken its toll, but he never sounded tired, only grateful. Playoff losses, missed shots, trades and turmoil, nothing dimmed the bond. And when others ranked him, he rarely responded, because he knew the rankings would fade. The narratives would change, but the integrity of the work the night lifts, the cold tub recoveries, the long flights with aching knees that stayed in his quiet moments. He sometimes returned to empty gyms, just him, a ball, and the echo of bounce on hardwood. He remembered Frankie Walker. He remembered Gloria, loud in the bleachers. He remembered the cracked sidewalk where he first tried dribbling with both hands, and he looked forward, not back, not for more accolades, but for peace, for the stillness that comes only to those who never ran from pressure, but welcomed it with open hands. Because in the twilight of a career built on motion, LeBron had found something rare, a flame still burning, but without any fear of dark. There are names that thunder through history, names shouted in stadiums, printed on jerseys, typed across timelines. LeBron is one of those names. But here, tonight, while the world quiets down, we don't need the roar, we only need the whisper, because long before the MVPs and the billion-dollar smile, long before the parades and pressure, there was only a boy with a ball, and a dream too big to stay still. He moved through hardship like wind through fence posts, rattled, bent, but never broken. Each jump shot, each fast break, not merely a play, but a prayer masked as motion, not for greatness, but for grounding, for somewhere to call home. You've walked this story now, from cracked sidewalks to championship courts. You've watched Kareem's record fall, felt the silence of the bubble, heard the cheers of a city healed, seen a boy become a man, become more than a man, not by chasing, but by staying humble, staying kind, staying present, in a world that kept asking for more, louder, faster, brighter. What makes a legacy? It's not the stats, it's not the debates, it's not even the rings. It's the quiet moments between the games, the walks through a school built on belief, the tears after a win earned through years, the late-night shots no one saw but the light and the rafters. It's choosing to show up again, even when the story's already been told. Every time LeBron stepped onto the court, he carried stories with him, of Gloria's strength, of Frankie's kindness, of the silence of Cleveland. Winter's each point a thank you, deferred until he was ready to give it shape. What becomes of a king when there are no more crowns to chase? He becomes a guide, a lighthouse for younger stars, a mirror to his son, a whisper in the dark reminding us, you can be great and gentle, powerful and peaceful. One day, someone will ask what LeBron meant, and the answers will vary. Leadership, longevity, loyalty, father, fighter, foundation. But maybe the real answer is simpler. Maybe LeBron James was proof that belief, when held long enough, becomes form, becomes flight, becomes fire that burns warm. Not wild, you felt him in motion, but tonight, let the movement settle, let the applause fade, let his story rest beside your own. Like a book closed gently, its final words still echoing in the quiet, because all greatness begins in silence. A hush, a hope, a dream barely audible beneath the noise of the world. And when you think of LeBron James, don't just think of banners or buzzer beaters. Think of the boy who stayed out past dark, shooting on bent rims, not to be seen, but to become. So rest easy now. Let the sound of the dribble slip into your thoughts. Let the arc of a shot follow you into your dreams. Remember, greatness lives quietly too, and maybe, just maybe, you'll close your eyes tonight and find yourself beneath gym lights, the scent of leather in the air. One more shot in your hands, not searching for victory, but remembering who you are and where you came from, and realizing that, like the kid from Akron once whispered to the game, you too carry something bright within, something waiting to rise.